Today we're going to learn about factoring with the greatest common factor, but first let's just do a little bit of a review. So we're going to go ahead and start with these three problems, and we're going to simplify the polynomials. Okay, so remember when we're simplifying here, we need to distribute this on the outside to everything on the inside. So I'm going to pass this a out to both parts. So a times 3a is going to be 3a squared, and then a times 7 is 7a. Right, so same idea for the second one. You're doing negative 2m times m squared. And remember, when you're multiplying your variables here, the exponents are added. So this is 1 plus 2. So I should have negative 2, and then m to the third, because 1 plus 2 is 3. And then negative 2m times 6m. Well, negative 2 times 6, that's a negative 12. And then m times m is m squared. And then negative 2m times a negative 1, which means that would be a positive 2m. And then for the last one, we have 4x to the third y times x squared. So remember, we're just multiplying the x's, and the rest of this will stay the same. So I'm going to have 4, and then we do 3 plus 2 to get 5. And then bring the y. And then take this times the last part. So 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. And then x to the third times 1 is x to the third. And then y times y is y squared. Okay, so what is factoring? Okay, so factoring is when you're separating a polynomial back into a product. Okay, so it's basically like here where we distributed it to get our polynomial, you're basically reversing that. So for example, your simplest form would be something like this. Okay, so like 4a squared plus 8a. So to get that in the factored form, we would need to pull out our greatest common factors between both parts. So between 4 and 8, your greatest common factor is 4. Okay, and then between a squared and a, the biggest one is a. And then you're going to leave whatever else was in there. So 4a squared, 4a times what gets you 4a squared? Well, that would be a. And then 4a times what gets you 8a? Well, that's 2. Okay, so polynomials that cannot be factored at all are called prime. So if you get one that you can't do anything to, you would write the word prime. So there are several factoring methods, and the approach depends on what your polynomial actually is. Today we're starting by identifying and factoring out the greatest common factor. So your steps for that is step 1 is to identify the greatest common factor of the polynomial. So you're going to check your coefficients first for the greatest common factor. And then you're going to look at the variables. And a variable must be present in all terms to be a GCF. If the variable is present in all terms, then you can take the one with the smallest exponent. And then step 2 is to divide each term by the GCF and leave the remaining factors in parentheses. And then check your work by distributing. So we kind of did something similar to this whenever we were doing the simplifying radicals. It's kind of the same idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and pull out our factors. So for the first example, you're going to do 3x plus 12. So I need to figure out what is my common factor here. Well, both terms do not have an x term. So I know that that's going to be on the inside of the parentheses. Our coefficients are 3 and 12. And I know 3 goes into 3 and 3 goes into 12. So I'm going to pull the 3 on the outside. And then the x doesn't have a match. And then 3 times 4 is 12. So 4 would go here. All right, so try 2. For number 2, your common factor is 7 because 7 and 7 both go into this. So we have 7, and then the y has no common factor. And this is a minus 1 because 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. For number 3, again, we have 8 and 36. The biggest factor that goes into both of those, 2 goes into those, but is that the biggest one? Let's try 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 36 divided by 4 is 9. And I don't think there's going to be anything bigger that goes into that. So let's go ahead and use 4. Okay, and if you need to, you can create factor trees and list out all of the common factors. So I got 1, 8, 2, 4, 4, 2, 8, 1. Obviously, you don't need to put the second half here because it's the same numbers. But I've got 1 and 36. I got 2 and 18. I've got 3 and 12. And I've got 4 and 9. So 4 here and 4 here. So I know 4 is going to be the biggest one that we've got. So I'm going to go ahead and use 4. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. The m doesn't have a common factor, so I'm going to go ahead and write that down. And then plus 36 divided by 4 is 9, and n does not have a common factor, so the n stays. Try 4. For 4, your common factor should be 5. So you pull 5 out, and then you're left with x plus 6y. All right, number 5. So this time, again, we don't have a variable to pull out, so go ahead and try this one. Your common factor here should be 3. And then you're left with 2a squared plus 9. All right, so for number 6, we do have a common factor here. We can pull something out of 4 and 24. And then we can also pull something out of y squared and y. So I do know that 4 goes into both 4 and 24. So 4 is going to be on the outside. And then I have y squared and y. So the smallest coefficient that goes into both is going to be my 1. So I'm going to put a y here. So it's 4y. And then in the parentheses, I'm going to take away my 4y from this, and I'm left with y. And then minus 4 times a negative 6 gets me a negative 24. And the y is already on the outside. Okay, and you can check this. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you check them by multiplying and making sure that when you multiply this, that you end up with this answer. Okay, so just double check. Well, 4y times y, that's 4y squared. And then 4 times negative 6 is negative 24. Y times 1 is y. And yes, that does match up. All right, so go ahead and try number 7. For number 7, the common factor you can pull out of here is 3d. And then you're left with 7c minus 1. So when c doesn't have a match, it stays on the inside, but since both of these had a d, that's the one you pull on the outside. All right, try 8. Your common factor here is 2h. And you're left with 7g minus 9. All right, so go ahead and try number 9. All right, so the biggest number that goes into both 15 and 30, or negative 30, is 15. The biggest a that goes into a squared and a is a. The biggest b is b. And then I'm left with, since I take all this out, I'm left with just one a. And then I'm left with minus 2. Try the next one. All right, the greatest common factor that comes out of 16 and 24 is 8. And then the biggest thing between b and b is b. And c squared and c would be c. And then I'm left with 2c. And then 8 times 3 is 24. And the bc is already on the outside. Try 11. All right, so this one, the greatest common factor between ab and a, or minus a, is positive a. Okay, so that means I'm left with a b here. And then to get a times what is a negative a? Well, a times a negative 1 is a negative a. So we need to make sure we write that. All right, for 12, our greatest common factor here, we don't have any coefficients that are going to be the greatest common factor, so that 3 is going to stay on the inside. I have x squared, and I have x, so I'm going to put an x on the outside. And then I have y and y, so y is going to go on the outside too. And then I'm left with just one x on the inside, and then plus 3. All right, for number 13, we have 5x and we have 13y, negative 13y. 5 and negative 13 don't have any common factors, and neither do x and y, so this one's going to be prime. All right, for 18, so we have a lot more variables here, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and still try this. We've got 18, we've got negative 48. The biggest common factor, the greatest common factor between the two of those is a 6. Now we have a squared and a, so that's a. B and b, so it's b. C squared and c to the third, so c squared is going to be the biggest that goes into both, okay? And then times the parentheses. And then what we're left here is with 3, because 6 times 3 is 18. Then we had a squared, so we're going to bring down the extra a. B is matched up, the c is great, we're done. Okay, and then minus 6 times negative 8 is negative 48. And then the A matched, the B matched, but there's an extra C up here, so I'm going to bring down the C. All right, so for number 15, yes, now you have 3 numbers, and that's okay. You're going to go ahead and just look for the common one between all 3. So we have 2, negative 2, and 4. The biggest number that goes into 2, negative 2, and 4 is a positive 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put that. And then I have x squared, x, and x. So x is the biggest. And then y squared, and y. And y is the biggest there. And then the parentheses, so now we're just going to have 3 numbers on the inside here. Okay, so we still pulled out our one common one, and now we have 3 left on the inside. So I have 2. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we're good. X squared divided by x, that's just 1x. And y divided by y is 1. And then we have minus, and then that's going to be a negative 1 because negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. X divided by x is just 1. And x squared divided by y is y. And then here we have plus 4 divided by 2, so that's plus 2. And then x divided by x is 1. Y divided by y is also 1. All right? So go ahead and try number 16. I'm going to do one more with you, and then you're going to try the rest on your own. All right, so number 16, the greatest common factor between 9, negative 18, and negative 24 is going to be 3. Okay, and then r to the 8, r squared, and r. So the biggest one between those is just a positive 1r. Okay, and then there's no s term for all of them, so that's going to stay on the inside. So now I have 9 divided by 3, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. r to the 8th divided by r, that's 8 minus 1, that's 7. Minus 18 divided by 3, that's 6. And then r squared minus r, that's just 1r, and then the s. And then minus 24 divided by 3, that's an 8. R divided by r is 1, but s squared doesn't have a match, so I'm going to go ahead and write that. All right, so we're going to do 17, and then I'm going to have you try the rest. So for 17, we have 6, we have 14, and we have negative 10. Well, the biggest number that I can think of that goes through all of those is 2. So I'm going to go ahead and use 2. And then I have y to the 4th, y to the 3rd, y squared. The biggest one there is going to be y squared, because it's technically the smallest exponent that goes into all of them. Okay? And then 6 divided by 2 is 3. 4 minus 2 is 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 3 minus 2 is 1. And then negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. And 2 minus 2 is 0. So that's equal to 1, so I leave it like that. Right, so now you're going to try the rest on this page.